everybody, how are you doing today? This is King Leo Productions, or if you read my handle, Old Square Wheel 60, Old 600. Yes, I turned my handle into my old name, because why not? And today I have a special treat for you. Now this is going to be somewhat of an update video to a video I made last week about my recent eBay purchases, but since I realized that my energy in the video could have been a lot better. So what I'm going to do for you guys here is, also while showing new purchases I've made, I'm also going to be updating the video that I did before. So without further ado, let's get this video started. So this review that I am about to carry out is something that I've been wanting to do for this channel for the longest, because ever since I brought my my Thomas series back in 2022, everybody has asked me these questions. Are any other engines going to appear in your series, like the narrow gauge engines? And at the time, I said no. I said no. I mean, I didn't say no, but I said I don't know yet. But now, with a lot of buying and dedication, let's bring them all into the frame here. Here they are. This took me about 2 weeks to acquire. I had to buy them in sections. So without further ado, let's get started with this video. So without further ado, let's get started with the first of the narrow gauge engines, the little old engine, Talithin's brother, aka Skarloey. Now Skarloey, this is a character that needs no introductions, no special words, no nothing, because everybody knows Skarloey. He is the #1 engine of the Skarloey Railway on the island of Sodor, and he is one of the more noticed. He is one of the more characters. I think a lot of characters also recognize him due to his #1, and since him and Thomas carry the #1, that makes them even more noticeable. And what can I say about Skarloey? Skarloey is actually one of my favorite characters in the series because I like his whole character. It's like, he's one of the oldest engines on Sodor, but he also has this youthful charm and never afraid to have fun. Now I am aware how he was during the how can I say, the late model series, and I know a lot of people were upset with that, which is pretty understandable. But this guy, I gotta say, my favorite depiction of him is during the CGI era, because he is shown as this old and wise character who keeps the other narrow gauge engines in line. My favorite appearance of him was in Blue Mountain Mystery, when he kept telling Rheneas that, "Oh, you do not need a new coat of paint. You are fine." But anyway, enough background on this character. Let's see. So as we look around, this is one of the older models of Skarloey, which is it has the brighter paint, the old-looking face, the older model face, and not to mention it has the widow's peak in the back. And I think this model is a 2002, so this is a birth year model, because this is the year I was born. So this is this is a very good model. Like, for it being a used model, it has not a lot of wear and tear. It has a few scrapes and scratches, but overall it looks pretty good. Now I do notice that there's a line on his cab here, so I guess if one day I wanted to, I can take this off and make a cabless Skarloey, But I doubt I'll be doing any flashback sequences in my narrow gauge part of the series, so we'll see. So now, that's for Skarloey. Now, the next engine that I'm bringing into the spotlight here is Skarloey's brother. Yes, I think they're brothers in the series. Yes, yeah, they are. Skarloey's brother, Rheneas. Now, when I was buying narrow gauge engines, I was very picky about it, because I really did not want certain narrow gauge engines. Like, for example, this is the Rheneas that I wanted for the get-go. I wanted the classic-looking Rheneas, but for a while, the only ones that was available was the one with the white wheels, and I did not want the one with the white wheels because, again, it had white wheels and it had a Sir Handel-ish face. And not to mention, I love the look of the original narrow gauge engines more than the newer ones. But without further ado, let's get to it. So Rheneas is another character that needs no introduction. He is Skarloey's brother. He arrived on the railway a little bit after Skarloey, and not to mention, he is a very, like I said, another character that's easily recognizable. He is the engine that saved the Skarloey Railway when they were about to get closed, when Skarloey wasn't working, and not to mention, he was also in need of a coat of paint in Blue Mountain Mystery. But like I said, Rheneas is a very recognizable character. Because honestly, I loved his stories, especially the Gallant Old Engine. That is my favorite narrow gauge story. And not to mention, like I said, he's just a good character. I love Rheneas. He is one of my favorite narrow gauge engines, and it's like him and Skarloey's history and the books. That was like one of my favorite part of the Railway series. How they basically fleshed out the origins of these two, and basically wanted to make sure we know why they're important. And not to mention, like I said, my only gripe with this model is that it's a bit of a indigo. I mean, it's a bit of a reddish, purplish red, but honestly, I don't mind it that much, but I would rather him have the same red as Skylory or his orange TV series color. But all in all, it's not a big gripe. I'm just glad I have Rheneas in this collection. And let's put him behind his brother, because the next one, I'm pretty sure you can already guess who's next. I'm going to do Sir Handel. Sir Handel is, well, there's a lot I can say about Sir Handel. There's a lot I can say about this guy because he has been the subject of a lot of narrow gauge engine episodes. Like, he was in Bulldog as he was originally named Falcon, of course, and he is based off of Sir Hayden. Or if I forgot to mention about Rheneas, he's based off Dolgok from the Talithin Railway. He's based off Sir Handel from the Talithin Railway, and like I said, Sir Handel is an engine of lots of stories, lots of potential. Like, for example, he was in Bulldog under his name Falcon, and not to mention he had a few other episodes in the season 4. He was absent from the series and didn't really appear till I think season 8, season 9, one of those seasons. And his reasoning for his absence were saying he was working at a quarry. But I like to think that he was away. I like thinking he was away at the Talithin Railway during this time. So, because I don't know, being punished to work at a quarry for years is kind of, I don't think they would do that. But like I said, this is an older model. I wouldn't mind if I did get some newer models. I would not mind getting the newer models of him and Peter Sam, just because I do like how their proportions in their later models reflect now. Now, I remember years ago, I had a friend that I used to play wooden railway trains with, and she had a wooden railway Sir Handel. And like I said, this is a model very similar to hers, but she had an older model, the one with no name on the bottom. But this is a very good model, and Sir Handel is another one of those interesting characters in the Railway series and the books. And the TV series, because he has, he just has, especially him and Duke. Him and Duke's arrangements are my favorite because it's like, he's the young, cocky character, and Duke is the old and wise character that knows better. But they all mean well at the end. But let's move Sir Handel out the way. And the next character, as I said, I'm basically going in numerical order, so you can probably guess who it is. And it is Peter Sam. Well, as you know, Peter Sam was once named Stewart, and he worked on the Mid-Sodor Railway with Duke, Sir Handel, and many other engines. Now, this is like I said with my Sir Handel, I said that I would not mind getting some of the newer models because of how they look. Because, like, for example, he has this is his normal funnel here, but on the newer model, he has this diesel injector thing, I think. But like I said, I'm fine with what I have, at this moment. Now, he has a Widow's Peak, but he's the later models that has the name on the bottom. And not to mention, like I said, Peter Sam is just he's a very character. I've enjoyed a lot of his episodes, too. Like, my favorite episode, I forgot which season it was, but it was when he was looking for Proteus's magic lamp. Before you guys ask, at some point, I will buy Proteus at some point, because I need to find him, but at some point I will buy him. But overall, like I said, I wouldn't mind getting the newer model, but at the same time, I'm fine with what I have now. I'm not going to be picky. I'm going to be appreciative of what I have and everything else. But that's it for Peter Sam. Let's put him at the back of the rest. So, the next engine on this list is going to be Skarloey Railway's one of 2 diesels that they own, Rusty. Now, Rusty. One of the characters that restored our faith in diesels in the television series. And I say that because, in earlier seasons, we were introduced to characters like, Diesel and Mavis, who believed that they were superior and really just thought they were better than most of the steam engines. But Rusty, on the other hand, really changed that diesel stereotype, because Rusty only wants to work beside the steam engines. He wants to prove his worth. Not because he feels he's superior, but just because he just wants to be an engine just like the rest of them. And he had many enjoyable episodes. I remember the one episode where him and Duncan, I think it was Rock and Roll, and he had to rescue Duncan. And, Duncan had his prejudice at first, but he came to realize that Rusty is just trying to be useful, and, maybe he shouldn't be rude. And not to mention, Rusty is going to be a touchy subject, but I never got why they made him gender fluid in the television series, because, I never got that, because I realized that, I learned what gender fluid means, but it was like, it's a diesel. It's a diesel engine. I did not know. Why did they say they? Why did they say they? Or the little diesel? It's like, come on now. Besides, no hate on those who are gender fluid. I'm just saying, I don't believe that should have been a train, because he's a train. He's not even a person. Look at him. I'm just kidding. He is a person. He's a good person. But yeah, he's just, like I said, he's a very interesting character. Now, I got the older model to reflect more of what he looked like in the television series in the early seasons. I did not like how they kind of supersized his face in a lot of ways in later seasons, but like I said, I'm not going to judge, because, like I said, everybody has their preference. If you like the newer Rusty, that's good. If you don't, that's okay. In the end, this is an older model too, because it has no name on the bottom, but he has his name on the side, so that's good. So let's put Rusty over here at the end. And like I said, if you already guessed who's next on this list, you get a gold star for you. And here we have one of the many Scottish engines on the railway, Duncan, who believes that he's overworked and he feels like he needs to be more appreciated, even though he spends most of the time screwing up. But I guess Duncan just has to realize that he is appreciated on the island. Now, there's a lot of things I can say about Duncan. It's like, he's one of those characters in the TV series that, he had his character development moments, but he always would go back down into his, downhill spiral. Now, for example, after that Rock and Roll episode I mentioned in showing off Rusty, he was rude towards engines. He was rude towards Rusty, and I guess it was like he promised to be better. But however, in the next season, he clowns Peter Sam for losing his train, and enjoys him being punished and stuff. But he has to get humbled over and over again, and not to mention, one of the things that kind of made me appreciate Duncan more is when he was gone for a while. Like, I remember last time he was seen was season 12. Season 12, and that I think last time he was seen in season 12, because the narrow gauge engines, they disappeared for a long while until Blue Mountain Mystery. And I remember watching Blue Mountain Mystery and wondering, hey, where is Duncan? Duncan should be here. But I found out why. That his bassist, Douglas, on the Talythan Railway was being overhauled, and they didn't have access to his model, so he was exited out. But however, one of the biggest things that happened for me when watching the later Thompson Friends series was how they brought him back in season 18. Now, here's one thing that I never really discussed on this channel before, but the Brenner era is my favorite era of the Thomas CGI series, because it practically gave us what we wanted. It practically gave us all the characters that we loved, all the characters that we miss seeing on our television screens. For example, we got Bill and Ben, Duck, Oliver, Daisy, all these characters that we missed. And not to mention, he also brought back Duncan. Now, I was in the end, the returning characters thing is a bit of a sore spot for the community because there were a lot of characters we wish that would have returned. You know, like for example, another character that we may have wished we returned was anyway. But you know, it's over now. But like I said, I'm glad he was brought back. Now his proportions were kind of weird looking in the CGI series, but they had to change things to be based on how they like it. So I'm not gonna be that guy and judge. So, without further ado, we're done talking about Duncan, so let's just move him back there. And the next two are kind of oddities in this narrow gauge railway thing because they literally have little to no appearances outside of certain media. Who am I talking to? Well, first we're going to start off with the number 7 engine, but I know you guys are like, wait, isn't Fearless Freddy the 7th engine on the railway? Yes and no, and I'm going to explain why in a minute. So, those of you who know the railway series is that the 7th engine on the Skarloey Railway was a newly built engine, Ivo Hugh. He was built on the Skarloey Railway and based off Tom Rolt. So that would make him one of the youngest engines on the island because he was only built in the 1990s. And he was named after, I forgot who it was an important guy on the Skarloey Railway named Ivo Hugh. So they named this engine after him, and that was pretty much his only appearance. Now, I mentioned this before. I watched Thomas Wood and Railway growing up, the YouTuber, and he is my first. A lot of characters in the Wood and Railway line I was introduced to due to his series. Like Ivo Hugh, Coldy, and the Big City Engine were one of them. He gave him, like I say, Ivo Hugh is one of those characters that I call missed opportunity. Now, I mentioned this before in some of my other reviews where you have characters like Arthur, Murdoch. You got characters like Arthur, Murdoch, D261, D199, Boko, all these characters that have missed opportunities, that stuff could have did more with them so we can get to know them more. And that would have been nice if we did get Ivo Hugh in the television series, but I don't want to show any disrespect towards the later series because, not to mention, Fearless Freddy is a loved character. There are some episodes I loved him in. And like I said, it's all about your personal preference. Now, let me move this guy over because, let's talk about Ivo Hugh. So, like I said, he's the 7th engine. He is painted in the Skarloey Railway series livery, which is red with blue stripes. Pretty much all the engines were painted like this in the Railway series. And not to mention, he has a very unique shape to him. And I also heard that he's the heavy goods engine on the Skarloey Railway, so he pulls heavy goods trains. So that's, it's actually kind of cool knowing that, they actually have these classes of engines on their railway. Even though I doubt they're going to have super long trains. But, like I said, Ivo Hugh's an interesting character, and I do plan on getting Fearless Freddy, and I will flesh out, when I do get Fearless Freddy, I will flesh out a whole reason why there are 2 number 7 engines on the railway. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to actually describe it now. So the reason why in my series that these two are both number 7 is because Ivo Hugh is the 7 on the Skarloey Railway, while Fearless Freddy was the number 7 engine on the Mid-Sodor Railway. But he didn't want to change his number because it was special for him, so the railway just says, hey, we have 2 number 7 engines now. So which is going to explain once I get him. I have to get him and Bertram. Now, I don't know if I'm going to get Luke at some point. I do have to figure out when I'm going to get Luke or how can I find him somewhere, but we will see. Now, the next engine is an engine that is really dear to us early Thomas friends, and I want to say early, like meaning during the original series, and here we are. Here is Duke, His Grace, the Duke of Sodor, in a way. He is the royalty of engines, a hero to all the engines, and I swear, not many words can describe this amazing character. Duke is one of those characters that I wish we could have seen more of. Now, I am aware that his model was turned into Bertram in the series, but I know that we would have loved to see Duke again because Duke was such an interesting character in season 4. We only saw him once after season 4 was over, and that was in season 7 in stock footage. There was more I wish that could have been done. Actually, I wish that he would have came back in the CGI series somehow. I know he was supposed to in some episodes, but I just wish we could have seen him, because that would have been cool to see Duke, because we got all the narrow gauge engines, but it's like they only cared about the main 6. Well, the main 7. Well, no, the main 6 in addition to Luke and Millie, but there were a lot of other characters that we were missing. But for example, let's get a look at Duke. Now, this model, I guess that his previous owners was given much love, and I say much love because you see all the markings and the paint scuffs and just everything. Now, a friend of mine on Instagram said I should repaint him soon, but I'm trying to decide what I want to paint him in. It's gonna be brown, but I don't know if I want it to be darker, or do I want it to be a lighter brown. But that will come soon enough. And like I said, I'm just glad to have Duke in my collection, because this is basically, you can't have a narrow gauge engine railway without Duke. And overall, this was the narrow gauge engines on my layout. This is all it. These are the ones that are here now, and I will get more in the future. Like I said, I plan on building a whole other narrow gauge layout, just to kind of, get everything in order. And I also plan on, like I said, doing more with the narrow gauge engines in this series. Actually, I thought about saving them till season 3, but since I'm not done with season 2, there are going to be some episodes about them in season 2. And I also plan to establish, like a Crovan's Gate area on the layout, so you can see where the narrow gauge engines have their way, and the narrow gauge engines the standard gauge engines have their. But overall, this was the video of me showing off all my narrow gauge engines, and I listened to you guys, so now they're here. Now I want to tell you guys to have a good day, and be on the lookout for more episodes on my railway series, and just keep on the lookout, because I brought this back for you guys, and I'm glad to be back. Now I hope you guys have a good day. This is King Leo Productions signing off.